Welcome back to It's Personal, brought to you by Gunderson Health System. I'm Chris Stauffer. Well, if you haven't heard about vaping, it's popular amongst the younger generation and some maybe in the middle generations, if you will. Here to talk about what vaping is and I guess you could say the downfalls of vaping as well is Dr. Todd Mahr, and he's a pediatric allergist at Gunderson Health System. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Chris.
Vaping, it's been around for a few years now, and you kind of warned about it, saying that this is probably not going to be a good thing. We're hearing more and more studies coming out, as predicted. The FDA recently coming out and saying we're starting a campaign against vaping and the dangers of it. What's going on? What's the latest?
Yeah, I mean, and the FDA campaign, just to be clear, is really for youth access. And what they've seen is the fact that this is a horrible trend of youth picking up and using these devices. So let's step back. So what is vaping?
Right.
Okay. So that's basically a term that's used in our medical technology. We call it electronic nicotine delivery system, ENDS, E-N-D-S. And that
also
can be
known as e-cigarettes.
E-cigarettes was how they first came out. And when they were first developed, what they do is they basically get at delivering nicotine, which is really why people smoke cigarettes, is for the nicotine and the nicotine's effect on your brain. And with that, unfortunately, burning tobacco comes 4,000 other chemicals, and a lot of them are harmful, almost all of them. And basically, the people who developed these thought, hey, could we come up with a different system to deliver nicotine? The lungs are a great way to deliver medicine to our body. Okay, they looked at using insulin in the lungs, so you could inhale insulin. In my field, in asthma and immunology, we deliver a lot of medications to the lungs. So the lungs are a great way to get things into your system, so to speak. And could they do it with nicotine? And indeed they could. So they make this juice, it's called, and it has nicotine in it and varying amounts of it, and has some other carrier-type chemicals in it. And that's where we get into some of the issue. It's not regulated, and the chemicals are not there. And the first ones actually were made to look like cigarettes. The end of them would light up a little bit. They would be round, kind of white with a tip, and you could refill them, and usually had a battery in it, and the battery basically charged a heating element, and the heating element then vaporized that juice. And as you inhaled it, the juice would get across the heating device and they would be vaporized. And that's where the vaping came from, the term. And it was meant more for adults initially, obviously, but then as all things go, there are more and more creations of it. And now about 5 products have 97% of the market of ENDS, or electronic nicotine delivery systems. Juul is one that's very big out there, Juul, and 70% is what they have. And theirs looks like a USB flash drive almost. You can plug it into a USB port and it charges itself. And you can fill it then with the juice. And the problem that a lot of us meaning the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Lung Association, our American College of Allergy, Asthma and Immunology that I'm involved with, all of us were basically advising the FDA to say, be careful. This is a slippery slope. This stuff is not necessarily going to stay in adults only. It's moving more and more into kids and youth, and it's going to have bad consequences. And the FDA kind of said, well, we'll get to it. There was a ruling during the Obama administration that stated the FDA had to come up with some rulings by August of 2018. Well, last year, Scott Gottlieb and the current administration said, we're not quite ready. We're going to put it off to 2022. And that created a lot of angst among many of us to say that's way too late. Now, fortunately, they've come back and said, no, we realize this is a problem. This is actually a big problem. And we're seeing more and more electronic nicotine delivery system use in youth. And we're also seeing then it move to cannabis, and they're putting the cannabis material in these e-cigarettes, so marijuana, and some other products. So all of that being said, the FDA is finally stepping forward, and they did 2 things. One is they basically came out recently and said, we're going to give these 5 makers 60 days to come up with a plan to tell us how they're not going to market to youth. And you might be sitting there thinking, well, why they're not marketing it to youth? Well, they are. A lot of these products look like candy. They look like play cigarettes. They're flavored for non-youth. I don't know how many listeners are out there right now who really say, I want cotton candy flavored
Right.
inhaler. I want bubblegum flavored inhaler. I want a chocolate malt. Chocolate malt might be something I would want.
Yeah,
But, in general, their flavors were more for youth, okay, not the mint and the other things that generally adults associate with smoking. So they have to come up with a plan for that within 60 days. And then they also just announced that they're going to be taking on a big campaign to address the epidemic of youth e-cigarette consumption.
One of the things that I've seen anyway is that many places that have banned smoking allow vaping because they don't know.
Right. I mean, that's a great point. And that was the one thing for those of us who were in the smoking cessation arena. A lot of our laws were passed before e-cigarettes were out, and so vaping really wasn't written into the law. And so some states have gone back and changed it, and I think that's good. There are loopholes that need to be fulfilled because it's not that this vapor is harmless. People, when it first came out, they said, well, this is just water vapor. Okay, well, no, it's not. It does have nicotine in it. It also contains basically a lot of the chemicals that are in antifreeze and other things which are not necessarily good to be inhaling. And so it's not just water vapor that's out there. Now, is it better than a cigarette? Because that's what a lot of patients always, parents, I'm dealing with kids and they have asthma and their parents might be smoking. And, if I have to say, well, yes, if you hold me to the standard of I'm going to smoke no matter what, I will not quit, then I would encourage a parent to go to an electronic nicotine delivery system. But I would like them to use that to then help them hopefully quit. The fact that some are being marketed as smoking cessation products is wrong because there's not a lot of good data that that's the case. In youth, the data is the flip side, that it's a gateway product that kids will use to basically start experimenting with using tobacco products. A lot of them then become tobacco smokers, and a lot of them, 29-30% of them, are using cannabis and other things. So it's not great.
We're talking with Dr. Todd Mahr, pediatric allergist at Gunderson Health System, about vaping. Let's talk about that gateway because I think that's also something that maybe parents and grandparents should be aware of, is that these electronic devices are being used for other means, cannabis. And I think it might be good advice to say something along the lines of watch your kids, make sure that if they are vaping, what is it that they're,
And that's the unknown out there. I mean, the whole
Right.
market is the wild, wild west because the FDA has the rights to administer rules and regulations, but they've not done that. And so basically, there's nobody looking at what these companies are doing and the juice that goes into them and what's in it. And then the fact that you can get these devices where you can put juice in it means you can put anything in it. And that could be a variety of illicit products, and cannabis is one of them that could go into it. And I think for parents and grandparents that are taking, that have adolescents playing around with this, they may feel like, well, it's better than smoking, but that's where I would draw the line and say, no, that's not the attitude. What I just said earlier is, okay, if it's an adult who's been a 30-year smoker and I'm trying to get him to quit, this may be a progression, but this is not something I want an adolescent to start with because that slippery slope is there. And we used to be able to talk to them about cigarettes. And luckily we've done a fairly good job of getting that modeling behavior of smoking is cool out of the media. You don't see it as much in movies. It's still there. I mean, tobacco companies used to pay heavily to have their products placed in movies. And, some period pieces now definitely feature more smoking because it was more popular back then. But all in all, we've done a good job of advertising, and everything else is ramped back on tobacco products. But unfortunately, that doesn't all apply to these electronic nicotine delivery systems. And so it's an issue. And they see their colleagues. They see a lot of peer pressure. of, hey, I got Juul and it's cool and it helps me stay more alert and I feel better and I don't seem to be as down as I was. Well, those are all the side effects or basically effects of nicotine. And they don't see any bad effects from it. And so it's our job to counsel the youth to let them know that, yes, you might think that, but there's a slippery slope and it's going to lead to bad things.
And while you're learning more and more all the time that vaping has side effects, it has negatives attached to it, the jury's still out in many ways because it's still relatively new. So we don't know what this is going to be long-term health-wise for individuals who are vaping.
Correct. I mean, that's a good point that we don't, where we have decades of data on true cigarette use. We don't have decades of data. We have barely even a decade of data. And the studies, are just now beginning to come out on the use for cessation. But the long-term effects, we haven't barely touched the surface on those. But I can't imagine inhaling these chemicals into your lungs on a regular basis is going to be healthy.
And at one point, there were not long-term studies on smoking either, right?
Yeah, it used to be, media campaigns with physicians touting cigarettes,
Right.
way back when.
Yep.
The good old days.
The good old days, right. Dr. Mahr, thanks for joining us and talking about vaping. I know this is, going to be an ongoing discussion for sure about, the effects of vaping and their health effects mainly, but certainly it's something I think that parents and grandparents really need to be alerted to.
Thank you.
All right. Dr. Todd Mahr, pediatric allergist at Gunderson Health System. And when we come back, we're going to be talking a little bit about the flu. Flu shots are available. We'll tell you when and where. That's next on It's Personal, brought to you by Gunderson Health System.